Hello, public speaking students. Today we're going to talk about state management. What do we mean by state management? We're not talking about public administration here. We're talking about the feeling that you get before you start speaking in public. Now, in my face-to-face class, I don't have to give this lecture because in that class, everyone gets repetitions every day and they naturally deal with what we call public speaking anxiety or communication apprehension in the most indirect but most effective way possible, which is just through desensitization. But because this is the online version, you don't get all those repetitions that the face-to-face class gets. So we have to deal with anxiety a little bit more directly, and we have to just address it and learn about what it is, why we get it, and how we can get rid of it, or at least reduce it. So we're going to talk about what state anxiety, communication apprehension is. We'll talk about some of the effects of it. We'll talk about some of the causes and also give you some solutions that you can incorporate into your home practice that will get you ready for the actual performance days. So let's do it. First, let's talk about the word anxiety itself. Anxiety comes from the Latin word called angusta, and I believe it's angusta or angusta. Either way, this word means a narrowing corridor that you have to pass through. So when people say they're experiencing anxiety, it's like the feeling of going through some kind of like narrow pathway where you feel like you're about to get squeezed. So you see like this little narrow walkway here rocking over the bridge, and you just feel like this enclosure on you, and you're like, no, I have to walk through this narrow pathway. Or in public speaking, I feel the pressure on both sides, that kind of thing. So anxiety is sort of that feeling of feeling pressure and feeling like you're being put into something narrow, and it's going to be rough going through. Now, when we're talking about anxiety relating to public speaking, or generally, it can refer to even interpersonal situations. The scholarly term, if you want to do research on this, is called communication apprehension. Communication apprehension. And that's basically the term of the feeling of anxiety before you engage in any kind of social interaction. Now, of course, public speaking is where a lot of people feel communication apprehension. And perhaps those same people who feel communication apprehension around public speaking have no problem striking up a conversation with a stranger. Or you could be vice versa. You could be somebody who public speaking is no problem for you, but if you get put in a social situation where it's just like you and one other person, like you get really, really nervous. So maybe you don't interview well, for example. Now, there are 3 points where you can experience communication apprehension, and everyone's a little bit different. But the first place you can experience apprehension is what we call in the anticipation phase. And anticipation is right before you speak. So those few minutes before your name is called, before you're called on stage, you might start feeling the butterflies or start feeling that anxiety. So that's called anticipatory apprehension. When right before you speak, you feel the butterflies or the nerves. But there's other points where you could perhaps experience the height of your apprehension. There's another point like confrontation. Some people, they may not feel nervous right before the speech starts, but within the first minute of them speaking, that's when they feel their apprehension. So some people experience their apprehension within the first minute of speaking, but then once that first minute or so passes, they start to get comfortable and then they feel okay. But thirdly, some people, and this is rare, but I know I've had students who felt this, some people feel apprehension in the adaptation phase. In the adaptation phase, this is when you experience apprehension in about the last minute or so of the speech. So perhaps you feel a little bit of butterflies before, maybe just like a little bit in the anticipation, and then you start the speech and maybe you feel okay, like you get past confrontation and you feel okay. But it's when you get to that last minute when all of your nerves start to set in. And maybe in the last minutes where you start to forget lines or you forget your conclusion or whatever. So It's possible that you could experience apprehension in all three phases, but usually what happens is everyone has a peak where their apprehension is the highest, but there's also a peak where their apprehension is the lowest. So maybe your apprehension is high in anticipation, but then once you get to confrontation, it levels down, and then maybe you don't feel any apprehension at all in the last minute. Or it could be something else. Maybe you feel a little bit of apprehension and anticipation, but then confrontation is where you really, spike, and then adaptation, so you kind of go like, okay, like that, okay? So everyone has their method of experiencing that kind of apprehension. Now, here's the problem. We really don't want anxiety to be visible in our public speaking. And the reason is because whenever we feel anxiety, we start to use adapters to deal with that anxiety. And adapters tend to make us seem like we are nervous, or that we have something to hide, or that we are not credible. But here's the thing, and so as we get into this lecture here, everyone's going to feel anxiety, regardless of how good you are. Even the greatest speakers that I know, and even myself, I still feel anxiety before I speak, okay? Like, I definitely feel it in anticipation. That's where I spike, is right before the speech starts. But here's the idea. It's not that we get rid of anxiety, per se, or that, we stop feeling it. It's more like this. You feel the butterflies in your stomach. What we learn to do is to make the butterflies fly in formation. So you'll feel anxiety, but it won't stop you. Your anxiety doesn't debilitate you. It's just a thing that you feel, but you do it anyway. That's the level that we want to get you at, is just regardless of any anxiety you feel, it doesn't stop you. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't hinder you. It's just a feeling. That's all it is. When you feel anxiety, and especially when it's out of control or it's at a very high level, I mentioned in the previous slide that you start to use adapters. So adapters are basically nonverbal actions to self-soothe. Now, this can be harder to see with static images, but I'll give you some examples of adapters. When people are anxious, there's a couple of things that people do to try to self-soothe when they're in an anxious situation. So if we do signs of or adapters here. Well, number one, you have these things called disfluencies. I know it's like a weird looking S. Okay. Disfluencies are basically ums, us, likes, any kind of filler words that are not necessary to convey the message. People who are not trained in public speaking often will have a lot of disfluencies. So they'll sort of talk like this. They'll be like, okay, today I'd like to talk about this thing where you do this thing, and when you go downstairs, you find blah, 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 and yeah. But, okay, so that's a bunch of disfluencies there. The ums, the us, the likes, the yas. So when people are nervous, they tend to use more disfluencies. So that's one impact of having anxiety, is the increase of those. We want to get rid of our disfluencies when we are doing public speaking. And so we have a drill for that helps eliminate such disfluencies. Secondly, your eye contact changes as well. So what you do when you're nervous, and you might do this, you avert eye contact. So we call it eye contact aversion. That means you might start looking down, you might start looking away, you don't look at the audience. So when you are giving a speech and you're not looking at the audience and you're looking down and you're looking up and you're looking away, what do you think that makes people think? Oh, this person is hiding something, or this person is guilty of something, or this person doesn't seem confident in what they do because they can't even look at me when they say the thing that they're wanting to say. So that's not good. Thirdly, people, when they're nervous, start to fidget. They fidget their arms, they fidget their legs, they start to pace. Okay, so that's another thing. They start to pace and sway. Remember in the delivery lecture, you know how bad that looks when you're fidgeting and when you're swaying? You make people seasick, and then it looks like you have to go to the bathroom. And then it can be a distraction for a lot of people, because remember, people are watching you speak and they're watching you sway and fidget your arms everywhere. Another consequence, you start to have shallow breathing. So some people, when they're really nervous, they sound really breathy. So there'll be something like, so today I want to, and like this like really breathy voice, and it sounds like they're about to, have, just some kind of stroke or something. So you don't want to sound like that. You don't want to sound breathy, okay? You want to make your voice sound very stable and calm. And then we have something called the sixth sign of adapter or of anxiety. So these are ways that we are responding to anxiety when we're feeling it. We call it the plumbing reversal. And I found this in a book, and I thought it was pretty funny. But yeah, it's called the plumbing reversal. The plumbing reversal is this. What's typically wet gets dry. Your mouth is generally wet and moist. But when you get nervous, you get dry mouth. And then, also, what's also typically dry gets wet. If you get nervous, your skin's typically dry. But when you are nervous, your skin starts to get wet. You start to perspire. You start to sweat. And very worst case scenario, some people, maybe their underwear is dry, but when they have the idea of public speaking, their underwear gets wet with you-know-what. So I always recommend that before you publicly speak, if you are a peer, that to go to the bathroom before the presentation, because you can't pee anything if you got nothing to pee out. Now, we've looked at these different signs and adapters of public speaking. These are ways that our body tries to adapt to anxiety. Okay, so disfluencies, eye contact, fidgeting, pacing, swaying, shallow breathing, plumbing reversal. These are all things that your body's trying to do to deal with anxiety. Now, we have short-term solutions to at least cover these adapters. Like I said, it may not be possible to get rid of the butterflies completely for most people, okay, unless you're really speaking all the time and it's just a thing that you do. But at the very least, we can show you some ways to deal with some of these adapters, so at least you can hide the nervousness and not seem like you were nervous, because it's all perception at the end of the day. Now, with disfluencies, of course, we have to do a drill, and what you want to do is start catching yourself whenever you say like, or so. You want to start counting. You want to be very aware of whenever those words come out of your mouth, and then you want to stop using those words in your everyday speak. The problem is, if in your everyday speak, like when you talk to your friends, your coworkers, your boss, or whatever, and you're constantly saying it's going to become natural to you, and then you're going to keep saying it in public speaking too. You have to stop with your everyday life. Next, eye contact aversion. A lot of people are afraid of eye contact, and I understand it's like scary because you're like looking at somebody in the eye and all this stuff, okay? Practice looking between the brows. Now, this is hard to show without me like on camera, but you can look at somebody directly in the eye, but if you look at the space between the eyebrows, it's very hard to tell whether you're looking at somebody in the eye or whether you're looking at their brows. So try that. So it would be like around here on this guy. So look at this area. If we were like looking at this guy here, you're not looking down here, you see, we're looking over here. Now, if you fidget or pace, I remember practice legs apart practice. Remember, you can't fidget if your legs are super far apart. And that's also with palming your thighs. Remember, with your gestures, palm thighs. So I gave some suggestions there on how to improve that. Now, with shallow breathing, meditation is good. I always take a deep breath right before I speak. So right before my name gets called, I just take a big breath, and I just let it all out. Just let it all out. And then by the time I get up there to speak, just a couple deep breaths as I'm walking up there, and then I'm pretty meditated by then, and then I can just speak normally. Now, if you're having the plumbing reversal, there's a couple things you can do. Reduce your core body temperature would be one. So if you're a sweater, like if you're somebody who sweats, drink some cold water before you speak, or hold on to something cold on your palms. So the idea is you just want to regulate your body temperature. So cold water can do that. If you're one of those people, if you're a peer, go to the bathroom before class. If you're going to cry, so some people, and this wasn't one of the adapters, but if you're somebody who cries when you're nervous, like that used to be me when I was in middle school. I remember I had to give a speech and I was like so nervous. I was like crying. I was like, meh, yeah. And then like, I don't know, it was weird. Like I was getting all teary eyed. Drink water. So just drink some water, swallow it down, and you'll be able to hold back the cry. All right. So those are all very short-term, shallow, very shallow level solutions. But if you practice those, it's all perception at the end of the day. If I can't tell that you're nervous, then you get all the credibility of not being nervous. It's all perception. Now, there are different sources of communication apprehension that are situationally based. First, there are trait-based sources, and these have to do with your personality. Now, a lot of people will say, I get nervous because I'm introverted, okay? And so I can't publicly speak because I'm introverted, and that kind of thing. Now, here's the problem with that. To be a good public speaker, you don't have to be extroverted. You don't have to be introverted either. You don't have to be ambiverted and all these different personality profiles that you take online, okay? All you have to do to be able to publicly speak is get in front of people, talk, and sit down. That's all you got to be able to do. And you don't have to be the biggest social butterfly in the room to do that. And in fact, most people who claim they're introverted aren't really introverted. Only about 7% of the population is introverted. What most people are is just shy at first, warm up quickly kind of thing. Okay? Most people don't say everything they want to say to the random people right away, but they will when they get comfortable. So you have to think too. There's a lot of leaders out there who are introverted. Think Jack Dorsey on Twitter. Gives amazing speeches. One of the most introverted dudes in the world. Watch a Jack Dorsey speech and you'll see. So a lot of people try to make an identity where it's like, I'm just not a public speaker. But public speaking isn't an identity. Being a good speaker is not an identity, it's a skill set. Anybody can acquire a skill set. Next. So I don't typically buy it then when people say I'm not a public speaker because I'm introverted. It just isn't true. And I've had over 400, 500 students, and I guarantee you not all 500 of them were extroverts, and they all did well. So more, I think, as a source of comprehension is state-based communication apprehension. And these are more based on external circumstances. And this is where I think more people experience anxiety or more descriptive. First, sometimes your anxiety is based on the situation. It's the context that causes it. So maybe it's the number of people that are in the room, or maybe it's the room itself. There's something about the stage that just makes this really nerve-wracking because I'm in a stage of 5,000 people, and that's what makes me nervous. If it was 5 people, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but because it's 5,000 people, that's why I'm nervous. Secondly, it could be because of the audience, who you're talking to. So some people don't feel nervous at all talking to their team of employees. Like they feel no anxiety at all. But if they have to talk to their superiors, so let's say they have to go talk to their C-suite executives, people over them, then they get super nervous. So audience-based anxiety or apprehension is all about the people you're talking to. So you might feel nervous with one group and not feel nervous at all with another group because the status of the people or because they're an authority over you or you're an authority over them. That influences whether you feel apprehension or not. Now, people can vary on this. So when I was competing in high school and in college, I hated performing for my own team and my friends. For some reason, that made me more nervous than competing for or performing for strangers. It's just one of those things where if I messed up in front of my friends, then all my friends think like, oh, you do speech, but you're not that good, But if it's like a stranger, at least I don't see them ever again. But some people are the opposite. Some people performing in front of strangers is really scary, but performing in front of their friends is not. So this is going to be based on kind of like what your personality is. But then there's goal-based apprehension. And what might make you nervous is the goal of what you're trying to accomplish. So compare asking your boss for a raise versus informing your friends about a new car that you got. So because the goal is asking for a raise, you feel nervous. But if it's just you're telling your boss about a brand new car that you bought and you're giving a presentation about it or something, or you're talking about a hobby that you enjoy doing, like that doesn't make you nervous because that's so laid back and so much fun. But asking for the raise or doing a speech for a grade, that makes me nervous because there's a goal here and I'm being evaluated and so forth. Okay? So figure out what applies to you when you're giving speeches. Is it the situation? Is it the audience, or is it the goal that's really making me nervous here? And figure out what you're comfortable with so you can know what to practice in front of, and figure out what you're not comfortable with so you can use that as a goal to get comfortable with. So here's the idea of public speaking. Your comfort zone is your enemy in public speaking. So the idea is that you want to expand your comfort zone. You don't want to maintain it. You don't want it to shrink either. You want it to grow. You want to become more comfortable with more context so you can speak in more situations and have more influence in more situations. So your comfort zone is your enemy. The comfort zone is the thing that you want to expand. It's not the thing that you want to maintain. As far as communication apprehension goes, from a public speaking standpoint, there are 5 different theories that each provide a different explanation and a different solution to communication apprehension. What I think you can do here is hear the 5 different theories and hear what their diagnosis of the problem is and their solution, and figure out which one do you think works best for you. Everyone's going to be different here, so hear the theories and then figure out what you think will work for you. The first theory of communication apprehension that we'll learn is behavioral theory. And behavioral theory focuses on a person's actions to develop a psychology of the individual, and it highlights skills and actions. Now, here is the problem according to behavioral theory. You're nervous because you just don't have the skills, or you just don't know how to speak well. So the problem in behavioral theory is skills, a lack of those. Okay? You just lack skills. You just lack the knowledge. You lack the skills to know how to speak well. No one's ever taught you public speaking, or when you took public speaking in high school, you only spoke in front of the class once or something, and it just wasn't a good experience for you overall. And you just don't feel like you've been trained in public speaking. So it's kind of like, you're kind of like Luke and Dagobah, and so this is Yoda and this is Luke, so hopefully you've all seen Star Wars by now. And so you just don't know the Force, right? And you're like in Dagobah, and you're like, my X-Wing crashed, and then all this stuff, and you're lost. And so you need me, so like I'm Yoda, and you're Luke, and you just need me to show you the Force. Now, I'm not at Yoda levels of public speaking. I mean, I think I'm pretty good, but like, I'm not at Yoda yet, okay? But like, I'm here like on your back, giving you cryptic messages here about how you can learn the Force of public speaking. Public speaking you will be. Okay, so that kind of thing. All right. Now, solutions. If you think behavioral theory best explains your situation, look, this is just a matter of me just not having the skills, but I feel like if I learn how to do public speaking, then I'll be better at it and I'll feel more confident. Okay, so you got to practice. Look, we got to practice. Okay, so keep practicing, keep doing the lectures, keep using the material. You're in the right spot. If this is your issue, you're in the right place. You're taking a public speaking class and you're learning skills. I also recommend collaborate with others. So I highly recommend, like I said, joining a Toastmasters group, developing a small practice group, maybe within the class, maybe when you finally meet each other, say, hey, do 2 or 3 of you want to practice together and we can help each other get better? I also recommend, if behavioral theory is your issue here, that dress rehearsals are going to be big for you. When you practice, I highly recommend dressing up for those practices so you can be in that enclosed. It's actually what's the thing called? There's a whole psychology now that's based on what you're wearing. And I think it's called enclosed psychology or something like that. And the idea is that what you're wearing influences how you feel. And so actually fashion does matter. And this is definitely true in rehearsals as well. Put yourself in the clothes that you're going to wear when you do your speech and practice in those clothes so you can feel that confidence, if you will, and also feel that pressure. And meditation also helps a lot too. So always being mindful of what you're thinking and what your thoughts are and being in control of your thoughts is really important with behavioral theory. But basically, just learn the skills and practice, okay? And you'll get better. The next theory is called learning theory. And in learning theory, what we're focused on is the classic Pavlovian experience. Remember Pavlov's dogs, right? So remember, the dogs, he conditioned them with the bell. So every time he rang the bell, so first he would ring a bell and then he would feed the dogs. And the dogs, he did that a couple times and built those repetitions. And then eventually he would just ring the bell and the dogs would naturally salivate because they associated the bell with food. So that's basically classical conditioning right there. According to learning theory then, the diagnosis, the problem with you is that you have developed you associate public speaking with a negative situation. Okay? You associate public speaking with something negative. Okay? This could have been for a lot of reasons. Maybe when you were a kid, you had to get in front of people and people laughed at you and ha ha, and then you just I don't know, you got booed off stage or something, you got tomatoes thrown at you and got sand kicked in your face at recess, whatever. So you associate public speaking with that negative experience. So now anytime you think of public speaking, you think of that negative experience and you just think there's negativity associated with public speaking. Or you associate public speaking with a negative feeling. All you think about is the negative feeling of public speaking. It's me getting nervous, and then that makes you nervous, and then it just makes you more apprehensive about public speaking. So whatever happened, you've over time have just associated the idea of getting in front of people and talking with something negative. Maybe it was a past experience, maybe it was an emotion, maybe it was seeing somebody else go through public speaking and having a negative experience, so now you assume that that's what it always is with people. But in any case, you've been conditioned. So, how do we deal with that? Well, there's a couple of solutions for that. First, practice. What you have to do is extinguish the conditioning by continually having practices that build your confidence. So what you often have to do when people experience a bad performance is you have to go back to the basics and rebuild their confidence. So start with simple drills. Maybe just do 30 seconds of your intro and feel really good about those 30 seconds of intro that you did. And then when you feel good about that, okay, now add the next minute. Slowly rebuild your confidence or slowly build your confidence in public speaking. And then you'll start to those negative feelings will start to go away because soon all those small experiences where you're having small victories will replace all the negative experiences that you had maybe 5 years ago doing public speaking. The second thing you can do, visualization. Now, there's some crazy studies about this, but what you can do, and you can do this in the context of a meditation, or you can literally just sit in a chair and just close your eyes and do this. But just visualize yourself giving the speech very well. If you're feeling nervous the day of, just do a visioning session where all you do is you envision yourself giving the speech and it going well. Now, here's the thing. Don't just do it 5 seconds before you give your speech. Try to do it days and weeks before you give your speech. Start doing it every day. Part of your practice can be just you visualizing giving good speeches. Now, you still have to practice in real life too, but the visualization in your head, what you're doing is you're training your brain to associate public speaking with going well rather than reflecting on a past experience where it went poorly. So you're reauthoring the future with public speaking by visualizing what it can be for you. And then your brain naturally starts conditioning and associating public speaking with the future possibility of being awesome rather than the past fact or whatever of it being bad or negative or that kind of thing, okay? So visualizing. And there's crazy, because I remember reading a study where they had a basketball team, and maybe you've read this study too or read about it somewhere. There was a basketball team that practiced free throws every day, and then they had another team or half the team practice free throws just by visualizing it. So they just, instead of actually doing the free throws, they just did visualization sessions where they visualize themselves doing the free throws. And the visualization group did just as well as the group that actually practiced. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, so I don't need to practice. But no, but it's just the idea that visualization can be effective, I think. And then lastly, there's solutions-focused therapy. Now, you don't have to go see a psychiatrist. That's not what we're saying here. I know the word therapy is in it. But the idea is this. If you've had bad past experiences in public speaking, what you have to be able to do is just go back to those past experiences. I know it might be scary and you might be like, no, that kind of thing. But just go back to those past experiences. Chances are there were some things that went well in those speeches, okay? Like there were probably some good things. Like you might be like, no, it was bad. It was bad. And no, but like when you can objectively like just, okay, well, did you get in front of people? Okay, did you make eye contact? Did you at least get your intro out? Okay, that's a victory. Like, even if like the speech went south after 30 seconds, those first 30 seconds, you were awesome, right? So think about your past performances and think about the little things that went well and figure out, okay, those are the little things, and figure out how can I keep doing those little things in the next speech. So it's all about not how can I continue to do poorly, it's how can I take the little victories and continue to build on those to do better in the next speeches. So you have a lot of unconditioning to do, and you have to do that through practice, through memory association, through visualization, and focusing on the positives of your past and your present, and not being so focused on the negatives. The next theory set is biological theory. Now, in biological theory, this is focusing on psychophysiological aspects of anxiety. So those of you who are in neuroscience or biology, you might really like this theory. So this is focusing on the brain itself. So here's the problem. According to the biological theory, it's twofold. First, you're made nervous because of the onslaught of neurotransmitters that create anxiety. So you have a huge onslaught. Oh, that looks ugly. Okay, so onslaughter. Okay, so you have a huge onslaught of neurotransmitters that are overwhelming your brain when you feel anxiety. Okay, now we're not going to go into all the brain science, so all my neuroscience peeps, don't throw rocks at me because I didn't explain it well enough. But that's the general idea. Okay, is that you have neurotransmitters that are just firing up really fast, and that's what makes you feel anxiety. That's why you move and start talking faster and get breathy and all those things, because your brain's like on fire, basically. And as a result of these neurotransmitters, you have excessive activation of your brain. So that's where you have excessive activation of your fear response, okay? Now, your fear responses are either freeze, fight, or flight, right? Those are generally the three things that you do. You freeze, and you don't move at all, and you're just stuck. So have you ever been yelled at before? Like somebody yelled at you and you're just frozen. You're like, oh my God, he just yelled. And like, I've seen that before. You might fight. You might just try to fight through it, that kind of thing. Or you might run, okay? Now, the solutions then, according to biological theory. So they're going to give you a very different set of solutions here. When you're feeling nervous or stressed, a chemical that is anti-stress, that is anti-nervousness, is called oxytocin, okay? So oxytocin is a bonding chemical that we naturally feel between our mothers and our parents, or whenever between our lovers, people who we care deeply about. So you can experience a surge of oxytocin when you hug somebody, when you hold hands, when you shake hands, or just make physical contact generally with people. So, if you're feeling nervous, one idea that you could do is, of course, you could hold somebody's hand or, hug somebody if you have somebody to hug. And so don't commit, sexual harassment, anything like that. But let's just say you're in a situation where, there's nobody around who can give you a hug or anything like that. Even just having a picture of a loved one. So if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a dog, even a picture of your dog, looking at a picture of that can help release a little bit of oxytocin. You're not touching, so it's not going to be as much. But any way that you can get oxytocin released before the speech or, the days before and such, that can help deal with stress. And so that's why, and this is true, by the way, like all the stuff I'm teaching you isn't just true for public speaking necessarily. Like this can apply to being nervous about anything, like skydiving, be nervous about interpersonal interaction. I mean, all kinds of things. Like we're just really contextualizing this to public speaking, but this can help in any other aspect of your life. But if you notice, whenever you have like finals stress relief week, they bring in the therapy dogs. Yeah, because petting a dog releases oxytocin, you see, and that helps relieve stress. Secondly, what you need is desensitization / exposure therapy. And so this is my solution in the face-to-face class. Every day the students get in front of the class, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 90 seconds, and they're just getting repetitions all the time. So basically, desensitization is exposing yourself to the thing that you're afraid of over time and just constantly being exposed to it. And just when you keep seeing it every day and you keep doing it every day, you just get desensitized. Like those neurotransmitters just don't fire anymore. It's like not worth it. It's like, what, we do this every day. We can't do this every day. That kind of thing. And you just develop like calluses, or you just develop numbness, or you just develop it just doesn't affect you in the way that it typically does because it's not new to you anymore. And if you do feel the butterflies, you can turn them off really fast, or at least put them back in formation pretty fast. So you might do that through practicing with family members if you're at home. Maybe, like I said, joining a Toastmasters club, being part of a public speaking group of some kind, just being somewhere where you can get practice. An open mic night might be good if your town offers that, where you can get in front of an audience and just use open mic to give a speech. Cool. And then, this is pretty cool, there's sequential muscle relaxation that you can do. Now, yoga is always good with that, but if you're not like a yogi or anything like that, what you can do before speech is tense the groups of muscle in your body for a few seconds. So wherever you're feeling stressed, just tense it up as much as you can, and then just slowly release the tension. So like first, maybe you'll tense your back. So hold the tension for a couple seconds, and then just slowly release the tension. And then do it with your legs and do it with your arms. And you'll notice, like, after you tense, like, you feel like, and then you just let it go. Like, you just feel really relaxed. So try that. Try it with your feet, try it with your hands, try it with your arms, do it with your whole body. And take deep breaths while you do that. And that can help relieve some of the neurotransmitting that's going on. The next theories that we're going to talk about is framing theory. Now, framing theory focuses on inner thoughts and cognition. So we're talking about inner thoughts and cognitions here. And we're referring to how we make sense of something, how we make sense of an idea, or how we talk to ourselves, or how do we rationalize it. So there's different sets of problems depending on what you emphasize in framing. So first, there is just the framing problem. Okay. Whoa, that's ugly. Oh, that's like foaming. It's like there's foaming at the mouth. Okay. Just got dogs with rabies here. Okay. Framing problem. Okay. So perhaps the way you frame the speech is what's creating nervousness. Okay. So you make sense of a speech as being a performance. Maybe we're going back to that whole lesson that we think public speaking is performing. And really we need to be thinking of public speaking as a conversation. So the idea that you think of it as a performance, though, is what makes you nervous. Because then you think you have to like do things right, and like the audience is like closely guarding and, just really on you and such. So the solution, problem is like conceptualization, how you conceptualize. So then the solution is reframing. You got to reframe what public speaking is. So if your problem is you think public speaking is performing, a reframe would be thinking of public speaking as not as performing, but more as a conversation, okay? A conversation that you have with a large group of people where you just happen to do most of the talking, but you can still have, interactions with the audience and people don't know the script and so forth. So think about how are you framing public speaking? What is public speaking? And try to reframe it to something that you can make sense of and that can make you less nervous. This isn't a performance. This is just me getting a chance to express how I feel. Blah, blah, blah. Great. I like it. Some people it's a self-talk problem. So with framing theory, what happens is you create a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're like, I'm bad at public speaking. I'm terrible. So I'm going to go up there and be terrible. See, I'm terrible, And so they come in with a bad attitude. I'm bad at public speaking. So then they seek to affirm that belief. They seek to affirm that identity. So they do things that make them bad at public speaking. And then when they're bad at public speaking, they say, see, I'm bad at public speaking, because they fulfilled their own prophecy. They've set their own standards. They're bad at public speaking. Okay? We don't want that. So, solution for self-talk. Number 1, we need to start having positive affirmations. So I never want to hear an email. I never want people starting a speech with, okay, so public speaking isn't my thing, so here we go. Nope, not allowed, okay? So positive affirmations. So instead of that, start saying, I'm here to get better at public speaking. I'm actually pretty good. I think I'm good at this aspect, okay? Create some positive affirmations for yourself that praise the good things that you do. Even if it's not a lot of things, praise the good things that you do. Start thinking of yourself not as someone who's bad at public speaking. Start seeing yourself as someone who's learning public speaking. Learning implies that you're going to get better and that you're going to get good at the end, but that there's going to be mistakes along the way, and that's okay. That's part of learning. Learning is struggles and victories. So I don't want to hear I'm bad at public speaking. You're learning public speaking and you're getting better at public speaking, okay? So positive affirmations. And then also rewards. One thing that you can do, anytime you do something well, even just giving the speech, if you're at that stage where even giving a speech is really hard, create a reward for yourself. After your speech, maybe on speech day, take yourself out to some ice cream. Or maybe if you give a good speech on Friday, you'll go out to Barton Creek Mall on Saturday and you'll take yourself on a little shopping spree. Give yourself rewards. Give yourself something positive to look forward to after you do the thing that makes you nervous, and you'll start to associate the activity with the reward, especially when you complete it, okay? So create some positive rewards for yourself. But then there's the attribution problem. So this is another problem with self-talk. So what you do is you come up with excuses. So the problem is you come up with excuses for failing. All right? And then they happen, and then, you basically live out the excuses. So it's kind of like the self-talk problem with self-fulfilling prophecies. But basically you come up with excuses for failing, or you say, oh, the reason that person's, good at public speaking is because they were born that way. And the reason I'm not good is because I wasn't born that way, that kind of thing. So with the solution there is mindfulness. You got to be mindful of your thoughts and know that public speaking is a skill and anyone can learn the skill. And secondly, this is a very powerful thing. When you can name it, you can control it. If you're identifying poor excuses and you can name it, that's a poor excuse, you can control it. Anything that you can name, you can control. Give it a name. If there's a negative voice, give it a name. Give it the doubting side of me. Okay, and boom, control it. Go away, doubting side, because we're here to actually do well. All right? Now, there's one more, and it's the rational problem. Okay? And the rational problem basically says, you just have irrational fears that can be alleviated if you just confronted them logically. Okay? So sometimes the problem is you just have some irrational fear. You just have a fear of some kind. Like, I'm afraid that if I speak, people are going to laugh at me because I have an accent. And people don't like accents, and that kind of thing. Okay? So you just have some kind of specific fear that you just think is going to happen. Or if I speak, somebody in the back's going to fall asleep and start snoring, and then they're going to be snoring while I'm talking, and then everyone's going to start snoring, and just really weird scenarios, okay? So, solution. First, write down your fears. Whatever you're afraid of, write it down. Put pen to paper. We're going to bring it to life. We're going to name it, and then we're going to control it, okay? Then, when you write down the fears, what's the consequence? Write the so what. Okay, I'm afraid that when I'm speaking, I'm going to forget one of my lines. Okay, so that's the fear. The consequence. If I forget one of my lines, people are going to think that I'm not smart. Okay? Then write down the percentage likelihood that that's going to happen. And that's like a 70% chance. Okay? Now, when you write it down, what you can then do is say, you can reframe that. Well, what happens, is it possible that, and so what you do is reframe the consequence. So the consequence right now is you're afraid that people are going to think you're not credible. What you do is you try to reframe the consequence. So you'll say something like this. Is it possible that if you forget your lines, it actually might make you more credible because then they know that you're really thought about what you're going to say? Is it also possible that if you forget your lines, you can always recover by, pulling out your note card or just giving yourself a second? And then when you recover, people think more highly of you because you had a moment where you forgot your lines, but then you got back and you bounced back and you actually finished the speech really well. You see? So think about what your fears are. Try to be very specific. Think about what it is, what's the consequence and the likelihood of it happening, and then start reframing your fears as things that can be positive. You see? That's reframing. And then lastly, we have evolutionary theory. So evolutionary theory basically looks at how humans have evolved from the past thousands of years. So human evolution, caveman days, right? The caveman. I know that's like a weird, so all my biology people, caveman days, that kind of thing. But you know what I mean, okay? So thousands of years ago, when we were herd animals and we traveled in packs and all those things. So kind of going back to that level. So the idea of evolutionary psychology, right, is the idea that a lot of our psychology is still based on how we lived thousands of years ago when we traveled in bands and packs and tribes and so forth. And so there are still results of ways of us thinking and ways of doing things that that can be made more sense of if we think how we acted 10,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago or whatever. Okay, so that's the evolutionary approach. Now, here's the problem, according to evolutionary theory. You're anxious because you're worried about the consequences of what you're doing. So a fundamental element in survival thousands of years ago was your social status. Your status was important to your survival as far as getting food, getting shelter, and getting sexual partners. And so some evolutionary psychologists argue that social anxiety is adaptive for humans because your social status leads you to constantly evaluate your status compared to others, and it makes you concerned about how you're perceived by other people, because if you're ever kicked out of the tribe, you're screwed, right? Like if you're not part of the tribe anymore, if you get kicked out, if you get disowned, if you get excommunicated or whatever, you're left to survive on your own and you can't do it. Like survival's not possible without other people, okay? So social anxiety is an adaptive measure to keep you in check from not doing anything that's too crazy or doing something that's too risky, because you don't want to get kicked out of the tribe if you were to say something bad or do something bad and then get disowned. I've even heard one narrative where in the tribes that you grew up in or whatever, in the caveman days and so forth, that if you were public speaking, it was either for one or two reasons. You were the leader of the group, and in which case you embraced public speaking, and so you were like a natural born leader and so forth. Or if you were publicly speaking, it's because you were pleading for your life to the tribe to not kick you out. So that's another kind of variation that I've heard. So public speaking then has always been associated with possible negativity, right? And keeping yourself in check. So problem is, social anxiety was adaptive thousands of years ago, okay? That's the problem in evolutionary psychology. Now, we know times have changed though. We know that if you give your informative and it's only 4 minutes and it didn't meet the 5 to 7 minute requirement, you're not gonna get kicked out of the tribe. We're not gonna kick you. You're not gonna be excommunicated from Texas for not, getting your informative to 5 minutes, and we're just gonna send you off and on a horseback and all that stuff. But it's just, we still have that thinking though. We still have that mentality whenever we get in front of people that all this is at stake. Now, here's some solutions then, okay? First, don't be so future-oriented. Focus on the present and don't think about the consequences so much, okay? Focus on your performance, focus on the here and now. Don't worry about what people are going to think at the end. Now, I know this is going to be kind of strange, and I don't know if this is the place to bring this up, but to a certain degree, in beginning public speaking, we're very concerned about what the audience thinks, right? And so you should be thinking about, how can I adapt to my audience? How can I do that? But there's a certain degree also where you have to not care what the audience thinks, or at least not make that your focus. What you have to focus on is giving a good performance, performing well, doing things that work for you so that you can give the most present-oriented performance possible. Secondly, physical activity helps, like before, like doing a workout the day before you speak, doing push-ups and such. For some reason, that just helps. Also, mind capturing activities before you speak can help. So meditation, playing a game on your phone, doing Sudoku, doing something that gets you present in the moment is the idea. Also, music. A lot of what people do, athletes do this. Before a big game where, the championship's on the line and you're going to be kicking a ball around and so forth. Listening to music that gets you in the zone. So like listening to music that gets you hyped, listening to music that gets you pumped. Maybe you like to listen to, rocky music right before a big game. So that's in fact what I do. Before a big public speaking competition, I listen to music that gets me in the zone. I treat it like a sporting event, So I want to be in the zone. I want to be pumped. I want to be focused on the performance. I want to be just in the zone, if you will, okay? So what that's doing is it's making you focus on the present. It's making you focus on the performance. It's making you focus on the emotion of just doing well and not being so focused on adapting and being kicked out of the tribe and all that stuff, right? You focus on winning and performing rather than focusing on losing and being casted away by society, okay? Now, it's really interesting too, because a lot of you might actually be athletes and you've performed in front of hundreds of people perhaps, in a football game or in a soccer game. And maybe you felt nervous, but you focused on the game so much that you don't think about the audience when you're playing soccer, right? I mean, a lot of you were probably able to play just fine. Maybe you felt nervous at the beginning, but when the game started, the ball's moving. You have no time to think about the audience. Public speaking is kind of like that too. You write the speech with them in mind, but then you perform with yourself in mind. It's it's an interesting little paradox there. But anyways, music, capture yourself, physical activity, don't be so future-oriented, all right? So in conclusion, the big thing is you got to find your cause, okay? Self-diagnose here. Figure out, what is it that's making me nervous? Is it the lack of skills? Is it some past experience that I had? Is it something relating to just pure stress and I need to take some, I need to hug somebody before a speech or, look at a picture of my dog and so forth? Is it something with framing? Like, am I just not conceptualizing public speaking right? Or is it just I'm so future-oriented and consequence-oriented, I'm not just thinking about the present, okay? Either way, I highly, highly, highly recommend do some kind of mindfulness activity. Meditation, yoga, qigong, tai chi, 5 to 10 mindful minutes a day. Focus on being mindful. I've been meditating since 2011, I think, on a regular basis. Meditating, yoga, some qigong, tai chi. And that's really changed me a lot. And how I experience emotion, how I stay present in the moment. And it just gives you a whole level of mind control on yourself that I highly just recommend. Find some YouTubes on meditating. Find some YouTubes on yoga. I mean, just get a mindfulness activity. You're constantly bombarded with so much stimuli and so many messages and so many media and like, oh, here's my phone and here's my iPad, here's my TV and like, here's my computer. And like, you're just not constantly on stuff. You need to start looking at your inner verse, right? Start focusing on your inner verse. There's the universe and there's the inner verse. Time to start cleaning that out. Time to start figuring out what's in there. Okay, so who thought this was just a class on public speaking? No, public speaking is just a little site, but this is really about being vulnerable and learning about yourself. So address your cause. Address your inner verse and take deep breaths. And yeah. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, post on the forum, and I look forward to seeing how you all develop over the semester.